pleased to have this opportunity to talk about what we think is a tremendously important issue for the state of Missouri and a bill that we very much hope is passed. And we're going to start off this morning by having Representative Duggar make some introductory remarks. Representative.
Thank you. It's good to be here this morning and supporting such a great cause as trying to bring some transparency and some reform to this initiative petition process. As you've seen on the chart, we see that these petitions over the last 8 years have grown from 16, to 143, and they're almost getting, kind of out of hand. So I'm excited about offering this legislation in House Bill 1869, along with joining Senator Parsons on the Senate side, who is also working on this, to try to bring some transparency. A few things, that we're adding, the 1,000 signatures, I think, is a good thing to make every petitioner be maybe a little more serious about the petitions that they are turning in. And I'm honored to join the groups here with me that are also sponsoring this. Of course, we have Farm Bureau, we have the Missouri Chamber, we have the electric co-ops, we have the Association of Counties, the Municipal League, and
school boards.
And the school boards, yeah, that have joined in with helping to put this legislation together. And so we are hoping to get a chance to debate it in the chambers on both sides soon. So with that.
Does anybody have any comments? You all want to just introduce yourselves, Barry, and we'll start with...
I'm Barry Hart. I'm the CEO of the Association of Missouri Electric Cooperatives, and we represent 47 electric cooperatives providing electricity about 1.5 million rural Missourians. And we're very supportive of this legislation as well.
I'm Tracy King, and I'm Vice President of Governmental Affairs with the Missouri Chamber of Commerce. We represent over 3,000 businesses throughout the state and about 450,000 employees. We too are excited about the legislation. Appreciate Senator Parson, who could not be with us this morning, as well as Representative Duggar, for taking the lead in sponsoring the legislation, and we look forward to seeing its passage.
Todd Smith, representing the Missouri Association of Counties.
Richard Sheets, representing Missouri Municipal League, representing 668 municipalities.
Of course, I'm Blake Hurst, President of Missouri Farm Bureau, and we represent 113,000 farm families across the state of Missouri. And this was one of our priorities when we had our legislative work through the resolutions process last summer and had our annual meeting last fall. This is very important to us. We think that the initiative process in Missouri has gotten so that it's no longer transparent. It's turned into sort of a circus, and we'd like to bring some transparency and common sense to the process. So with that, we'd be glad to answer any questions that anyone has.
Looking at your chart and the growth of the number of petitions that have been closed, have any of you gone through and weeded out the multiple petitions by the same circulator to see how many actual proposals we're talking about, as opposed to how many just different documents have gotten thrown on the Secretary of State's desk?
I mean, we know out of the 143 this year, I think in the stats in your worksheet, I think there are 3 people turned in, is it 61 initiative petitions, and it was just on 3 issues. So as you can see, it's not just the number of petitions, that it's also just a handful of people filing multiple petitions, which has seemed what has grown actually the increase.
And each one of those, of course, takes time, staff time at the Secretary of State's office. Each one of those takes state funds, and each one of those petitions makes it less transparent to the voter. We don't think the initiative petition process should be thrown up against the wall and see what sticks.
How would these bills prevent that or reduce that? For instance, the fair tax people had something like 13 or 15 different proposals, usually with just minor variations between petitions, how would you prohibit that or slow them down? It would seem to me that a group that large, the 1,000 signatures ahead of time wouldn't really change their desire to throw out a number of different variations of the same idea.
Well, I mean, I think gathering 1,000 signatures takes some time and effort. And while we're not trying to limit limit the ability for someone to petition their government, if it's a good idea, then 1,000 people is a very minimal number to try to get that. So they would bring that with the initiative petition to the Secretary of State's office before that would even be considered and before that would begin the process. So, you know, we think it's a start. Is it the end? No. I can tell you that we had some of our members in discussing initiative petition form that wanted to go way further than where we are at and where we agreed to. However, we feel it's very important to focus on the transparency and the fraud piece. And I think the 1,000 signatures does limit somebody from just throwing out there, you know, 15 different proposals, because that's going to be 15,000 signatures that they'll have to get before they come to the Secretary of State's office.
So you have to collect these minimum of 1,000 signatures before you can even go to
Right. Right.
Isn't that a pretty steep challenge to, say, a grassroots organization, a citizens group, not a paid signature gathering group like what Rex Sinfield was used? Wouldn't that be kind of a steep challenge for some of these groups out there?
I think if you had any kind of group at all, be it the Realtors or Farm Bureau or whomever, you would have enough of a base there of your own members that you could go out and get that 1,000 relatively quickly and easily.
We've seen that too on energy issues. I mean, if there's an energy issue that has a major impact on rural Missourians, they will get energized, they will get involved. On the some of the cap and trade issues that were introduced in Congress 2 years ago, we had 800,000 emails and letters sent to Washington D.C. from not from paid people, but from rural Missourians who were concerned about their energy bills. So they will get engaged.
But let's say that Dan Reed and I get together because we're not happy with something that the legislature is doing. It's just the two of us, because the legislature's all screwed up on this issue, and so we want to put an issue on the ballot. That kind of grassroots thing that he was talking about, haven't you made it harder for just the two of us to find 1,000 people to get this idea before the voters so that they can have a say, or at least a check on whatever issue it was that we didn't like what the legislature was doing?
Well, first of all, the thought of you and Dan Reed working together, I find very frightening. Secondly,
so you should be written.
Secondly, I mean, we have to strike a balance here. Right now, all these groups, and we presume are fairly confident a majority of both the House and Senate, think the balance has gone too far in the direction of bringing petitions too easily. So we have to strike a balance, and we think 1,000 signatures is a way of raising the bar slightly, but we are fully confident that you and Dan Reed can collect 1,000 signatures if you feel strongly about the issue.
I think another problem is you two are Missourians. If it's two people from outside of the state that have a lot of money, and they're not happy with what the Missouri legislature did, even though they're not citizens of our state, but they've got a lot of money and they can get something on 15 petitions on the ballot, that's a concern of a lot of Missourians, and that's a concern of our members that have talked to us and have visited us on this. The out-of-state money is a concern.
You've talked about trying to have more transparency in this process. Whether it's an out-of-state group, and I'm sure folks at Farm Bureau would quickly think of Humane Society, or an in-state group. He already mentioned Mr. Singfield, who, whether or not he's behind all these things, is at least rumored to be behind all these things. Is there anything in these proposals that would require that people know immediately who the money backers are? Whether it's Proposition B from a couple of years ago, which the Humane Society was big behind, or it's one of these so-called fair tax deals that Mr. Sinfield may or may not be behind, is there a way that I would know before I sign a petition, not just who the person in front of me is with a piece of paper, but who's the money behind it? Do these proposed laws do anything along that line?
It does require, when you take the initiative petition to the Secretary of State, for you to file your committee form. The ethics report, I think, which is already required, but rarely do we see, and there's just not enough teeth in it. So it does require that you take that form, forming a committee, and show at least who's participating on that committee when you submit your initiative petition. And if you don't have that, then the initiative petition can't move forward. So we are forcing them to bring that forward with the initiative petition.
And would that apply even to Dan and me and our little grassroots? We don't like that.
You would have to have a committee filed before you bring it to the Secretary of State.
There are some people, think the eminent domain folks, who think that kind of requirement really attacks the idea of a grassroots effort. Why do you think it doesn't?
Well, I think the voters ought to know who it is that's behind that proposal, whether it's an individual or whether it's a group. I think that's one of the key transparency issues that we're trying to address here. And so, I mean, I don't care if it's you or if it's Farm Bureau or if it's HSUS, but I think we ought to know who it is that's pushing this.
And then because you've got an ethics commission requirement, the whole donation thing, I should be able to then figure out supporters by who's throwing money at it.
Maybe not immediately, just because of the filing deadlines and stuff like that, but at some point you would be able to, yes.
And you don't propose to change those filing deadlines?
You know, there's only 10 states that have a direct initiative petition like we have, only 4 states that are as wide open as our process. I don't think any of us would agree that a statement that said 46 states aren't a democracy would be true. I think it's possible to strike a balance between people on both sides of this issue and come up with a compromise, which we think this bill is, that makes our process more transparent and a better process.
Tony, this bill doesn't address any of the lawsuit issues that we've seen recently over, kind of like with voter ID or sales tax petitions. This is only for the signature part.
Right. It doesn't address any of those.
Doug, do you think it would, if passed, slow down the legal action? And I guess I'm asking partly because all these lawsuits wind up down the block, and the Polk County Circuit Court then becomes even busier dealing with 50 lawsuits alone in this last cycle, where not only are you tying up the Secretary of State's time and the auditor's time and a little bit of the AG's time, but you've got judges and folks at the courthouse who have plenty to do, now having to deal with all of the legal work that goes with hearing these cases and making decisions, and almost all of them go to Kansas City after that. I mean, if you pass this, would you slow down the legal?
It has a tendency with the signatures, I think, to maybe slow it down a little bit. Most of all, it brings a lot of transparency to the process by requiring the public hearing, and also that the Secretary of State has to post this on the website, within 2 days after it's filed, so that it's available for everyone to look at.
Right now, they put it on the website once it's certified. What's the advantage of putting it on the website after it's filed, so that people can just see what the bill is?
I think it gives people the chance to see what's being filed a little quicker.
Yeah, and right now, if you're tracking that, if you care about the initiative petition, you have to call every day to get an update. And this would require the Secretary of State to make those updates online, so you can follow and track that initiative petition as it moves through the process. Now, I can't remember, Tony, if the bill has an emergency clause, but most of the initiative petitions will be decided on May 5th. So by the time this is passed and it goes into law, the filing deadline for this election cycle will be over. So it should only impact new initiative petitions that are filed after the November election.
Do you have anything that would require, if a lawsuit is filed, for that to be linked to the petition on the Secretary of State site? So that if I'm looking there to see what petitions are out there, I would then automatically know that, yeah, this one was submitted, but it's also been challenged? Or am I still going to have to figure out A to B, because the names aren't always the same?
I don't believe there's a link to it in this bill.
Should there be?
I don't know.
We discussed having proponents in it and opponents be able to put on that website also their thoughts. So I don't think that'd be that big of a stretch to also have an additional comment there that it's being challenged.
And that stuff that's on the website is an administrative, I mean, we have some legislation that addresses, I think, the minimum that we think that is needed, but a lot of that can be done administratively without legislation. So anything above and beyond what we're requiring can be done through the Secretary of State's office.
One of the reasons for the lawsuits, some people say, is because the current Secretary of State is seen as being overly active in terms of writing ballot language. There are some people who say that there's no petition that goes there without getting rewritten for a ballot title. And then you have people in court complaining that they've either overreached or underreached in terms of that new language. Do you think having a different Secretary of State, which we know we will have, will make a difference in terms of the number of lawsuits? Or do you think the lawsuits go hand in hand with the volume of petitions?
I think they go hand in hand with the volume. And that's,
Yeah, we've been working closely with Secretary of State's office and the auditor's office. This was no attempt to slight the current Secretary of State or anything like that. We've been working very closely with her. We didn't. This isn't a slap at her in any form or fashion.
And I know these bills were written before Judge Beadham's ruling. Do you think the final bill, if it makes it through both houses, needs to also address that issue that's been raised of the auditor's constitutional duties and whether or not they can do fiscal notes? Or is that something for another day?
Well, Judge Beadham's decision is only one piece of the process. I think that decision is going to be appealed, and so we would like to wait and let that issue get through the court system and get decided before we look at addressing that.
We have time.